So the plan for today, I have a activity for today. We're starting to get done with chapter 6. Just a couple little things to review and maybe look at it in a slightly different way. And another reason for this is I bring in some arrays to give you some array practice, because we all need practice with our arrays. We want to get that down. So bring up the assignment, or under the activity, GUI building practice activity. And the plan is today we're going to walk through this, explain things, and if we get everything in there, maybe we'll add a few more things, because graphics, you can always do more. Even in your graphics program, you have it down and you have it working, there's always more you could do. You can always pretty it up, adjust things, and that's where, depending on your customer's requirements, you have to say, okay, here's where I stop. We have to get this finished. We have to get it delivered. Just like writing a book or writing a manual, you can always improve something, but you have to say, okay, it's enough here, and let's go on. When you're learning code, of course, you always want to learn more. And for me, I'm always reviewing and trying to remember stuff. You get old like me, that's part of your coding is, okay, how did I do this? And that's why comments are so critical, because you do forget things and you wonder, why did I do this way? Oh yeah, there's the link that I used the reference to, or here's the algorithm I was trying to follow. Comment, comment, comment. So what you have to do here is I have exported from Eclipse to an archive file, to a general archive file. I exported, but it's not complete. So that's why it says fix me. Download that file, and I'll go put it in my CS315 folder. And I'm giving it a new name. I'll call it Fix Me 2 because I have the Fix Me 1 there already. So download that to your Documents folder. And then what you're going to do is go to Eclipse and you're going to import it. It's the whole project. It's not just a Java file. It's the whole project exported. And I'll walk you through exporting projects if there's any doubt about how all that works. So now I go over to Eclipse after downloading that file. And I'm going to come over to Eclipse, and because it's a new project I'm going to bring in, I'm going to do File, Import. And now I browse to the archive file. So I go over to General and Archive File. That's where I'm going to import from. So Import, General, Archive File. And then when I click Next, it's going to then send me to a file browser to browse for that. And let's see if this all works. Sometimes it gets confused. Hopefully I'm not confusing it. So download the file, know where it is. Now import archive file, next. And now I browse to where I downloaded that in my Documents folder. And there is my Fix Me 2 that I just downloaded. Select that and click Open. And it's going to hopefully do everything I need from archive file. Please specify a folder. Oh, so I'm going to import into a folder. I think this is my main Eclipse folder where all my projects are going. So I think if I just say OK, let's see what happens here. No, I guess I have to select one. All right, I'm going to. I thought it would actually create the folder. Well, let's give it a name. Let's call it Fix Me 2. I changed the name when I saved it because I had already created Fix Me and I want to put it in a new place, like I'm starting from scratch. Yeah, I did a file import from archive file. Now, I thought it would actually create the file for me. That's disappointing. Let me try this again. So it's not giving me the right folder path. No, I thought the import would actually create the destination folder. Well, let me I'll import it into an existing project folder and let's see what happens. I think it'll make it a project inside of that, but let's see what happens. I'm not sure I like that, but let's see what it does. Now if I go to my Chapter 6 exercises, I'm guessing I'm going to have a folder inside of that folder. And I'm going to, if I just open that up, I'll see I have the program there. It got put inside an existing folder. Well, I guess I'll live with that. For you, you can, I'm going to try this a different way. This is kind of confusing if it doesn't have the folder there already. That's disappointing with Eclipse. Let me go do this another way now. I'm going to go to my Documents folder where I downloaded that. In my CIS folder. There is my zip file. And let's go ahead, I'm just going to go ahead and unzip this. Extract all. Now it's creating a file called fixme2 in my Documents folder. Now let's try this a different way. I'm going to go back to Eclipse and see if I can just do open the project from that. Let's see if I can do File, Open Project from File System this time. Maybe this is the easier way. Let me browse over to my Documents folder, my CIS folder, and there's my fixme2 folder. Okay, I guess that's probably the easier way. I thought the import from the archive would actually create your new project. So you can unzip it and then go open project from your file system. You see how I did that? Download it, unzip it, and then do file open project from file system. And then we're going to go and open those files that are in there. But let me know if you have any trouble finding that. Go down into the source file, and we got the dialog 1 is the one we're going to be fixing. I see red flags in dialog 1. And there's a main class which just has a plain old main class here, not doing anything terribly exciting. But let me know when you got that. Downloaded and unzipped. What's that? Oh, sorry. You right-click, extract. Right-click on the file, extract. Yeah, when you have anytime you have a zip file, just right-click, extract, and it will actually create a folder by that name, the same name as the zip file. And the way to tell, let me zoom in a little bit for you. I'm going to go to Big Icons here. Where's my View, Big Icons. There's a regular folder. There's a zipped file. And Windows is not very clear about this. It's easy to treat this as a folder, but Eclipse cannot open it unless you have extracted it to a regular file. It has to be a regular file, not a zipped folder.
Do we have dialog 1 and main class?
Yes, yep. Dialog 1 and main class are the two files you have in there. And I have comments in there. Now let's just walk through what main class is, and then we'll go over to dialog 1. That's where we're going to do most of the work. You ready? Okay. Everyone ready? Scream if you're not. All right, here we go. Here's the main class. All we do in main class is we're creating an instance of dialog 1 and setting it to visible. Now, this may look kind of strange to you. Why didn't I create a variable of type dialog 1? Well, if I don't care to do anything except make that dialog visible, here's a nice way to make one and set it visible, and I'm not even storing its reference in any variable. If I ever in my program need to do like dialog 1, set visible, set it true or false, then I do want to keep a reference to that dialog in a variable. If I don't care, all I want is make the dialog, set it, show it up on the screen. Here is a quick and easy way to just create it and show it. And that's all that main does. Once this happens, main is done, and the dialog now has all the activity. Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, we're going to be fixing those errors. That's your task. There's a there's a chapter 6 practice. You can ignore that one. Yeah, ignore the chapter 6 practice. We're looking at the chapter this chapter here. It shows chapter 6 practice source. You want to go down into the source folder in the chapter 6 practice. Are you able to find that? Thanks, Omar. And dialog 1, go ahead and if you can find it there, open dialog 1. This is where we're going to be doing the work. And it's full of errors because I had code in there and I erased it to make you walk through doing this code. So I'm not, sometimes you want to see other people's code and you just read through it. But you'll learn better if you're actually doing the code as we discuss it. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Dialog 1, the main class is needed because that turns on dialog 1. And open both of them. That's the dialog 1 that I'm looking at. That's the one that you have to find it and just unzip it. You go ahead and right click on the file. Right click, extract all. See how it's going to make a folder. That's the folder. Go ahead and click extract. And now you have a folder there. Now start up Eclipse. You can hit the window button. Oh, is there a shortcut key? There you go. There you go. You're getting there. Eclipse. And Eclipse. File and then apps. Go down to program. Go down to program. There you go. Up. You have it new file under app. Okay, there it is. Are you able to come? Maybe let's try a shortcut. Right click on that. All right. Well, maybe you want to follow along with someone else while we do this. Then go ahead and follow along. Sorry about that, Robert. Yeah. Don't do an import. Just do it open. Yeah. I thought I gave you the broken one. Looks like you have both. All right. Well, let's walk through the good one, and we'll be tweaking that. Sorry. Few Eclipse problems this morning here. Well, if you have the, let's see, when I looked at this, I had nothing in here, so I assumed it wasn't there. So I have the fix me. Well, let's just walk through this code here, and if you already have the working code, you'll watch me fix it. If you have the one full of errors, well, we're going to learn a lot by fixing it. So if you have the one with errors, you're going to actually learn more today. All right, so let's go to the broken one. Here's the dialog one. And what I want to do is create a game board with multiple elements in there. Well, remember, this is a J-frame. I can't do any objects in it unless it extends J-frame. So remember what that's about. I can create any old class and add extends J-frame to it, and then I can make it appear on my screen as a J-frame. Here's a label that I'm going to be using later on to display some information. And I've created a variable pointing to a label. Remember what this does. This is not creating a label. This is only creating a variable ready to reference a label. I have to do a equals new JLabel before it'll actually be a available label. Yeah.
So when you import something like this, you have to extend the Java library to.
When I create a class,
So I mean, like when you import it, because when I imported this, it had red lines on everything, but I just had it. It was because it didn't have the Java library connected to the project folder.
oh, I didn't do an import. I did a file open.
That's what I meant.
Okay. Well, I guess I didn't see that happen to me, so I'm not sure. So you had to go into the project properties and do the.
No, just let me right click on top of J, and it just said that we connect the Java library.
Okay. All right. So I didn't see that happen to me. So That's part of this whole. We need a little bit. I guess what this shows is we need a little bit more practice importing and exporting from one Java or one Eclipse environment to another. And this is where there's a lot of learning to figure out, is just dealing with the environment of Eclipse. We have one system, Eclipse, we can't even find it on the system. I'm not sure if that's a UD computer thing has been messed up, or somehow a shortcut has broken. And then Eclipse over here, you had some complaint about the libraries.
It was just for the file.
But you're able to just connect them?
Yeah.
Okay. So a dialog came up and gave you the solution to say, hey, try this?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so now we're back here looking at a dialog that I created just to practice. We're going to finishing up chapter 6 here now, just to practice how we created this particular little game board. Now look at here. I've decided that maybe I want to make a larger game board, and if you have it working already, we're going to come back here and adjust our game board size. Typical chess board is like 8 by 8. And so knowing how to do something like this, you're ready now to have a little bit more interactive kind of thing happening, and you could actually have some logic of like write your own chess game or some other game involved in creating this board. But for now, these are variables that we can come back later and change it. That's the whole reason for having this as a variable and not just typing a 3 where I need it, is I might want to adjust the size of my game. If I have my program depend on the variables, not hard coding in 3s, then when I decide to adjust my game, here's the only place I need to change it. And of course, a comment here explaining what this is about is critical for someone else coming and modifying this. Okay, now I haven't given the code here to set the title to this frame. Remember, I'm creating this will be creating a window, and I want to put a title there. So because it's a J-frame here. So what's the code to set my title? On the title bar? Yeah, this. Remember, this is referring to my J-frame. And typically when you're doing a J-frame, there's several things you do. You set the title, you set the size, and you set it to close when you hit the close button. So let's set the title, set, and I see title. So I have to remember part of it. Once I see the top one showing what I want, then I can enter, and it'll correct any capitalization for me. And let's go ahead and put in here your name, and we'll call it GUI fixed. All right, now that does the title. Set size. Again, I type this and then set something. Oh, look at that. Set size is the first thing that shows up. Hitting enter gives me the reminder of what variables need to be there. And you can choose your size. I'm going to make mine, I'm going to make mine 400 by 500. 400 wide, 500 high. Now, one thing that I forgot to put in the comment here is I should also have it close when I'm done. So let's do it. This dot set default close operation. Set D, and I see default close operation show up. And what I wanted to do is close. Now this, sadly, the suggested answers are not in here, or is it? Yeah, there it is, exit on close. I want to choose exit on close, and it gives me the suggestions, the nice help from Eclipse. That means when I click the X button, it'll end my program. If I don't do this, I can close the window, but my program will still be running, and I have to click the little red stop the program box. Yep, exit on close. Yep. And that's the setup of my J-frame. Now remember, before I can put elements on the J-frame, I need a content pane. And I've started the line. I know I need a container to get the content. So remember what you need to do here. It has something to do with my frame. So what do I type? This. Type this, because I know I need to somehow figure out where I can add my elements to, and then I do get, and look at that, the first thing showing up there is the get content pane. That's my container. And see, Eclipse is guessing what I need to do based on what it saw me type beforehand. And so that's why I see that 72%. Hitting enter, that's all I need to do. It gets the content pane for this JFrame. And now, in order for things to show up correctly as I start adding them later on down here, yeah, I add a semicolon, yeah, at the end. And now, to set the layout, this is again something that we've done already, but little by little we want to start memorizing some of this. Or often you'll look at previous examples, what did I do here? But try to build up your standard items. It's a this, not this, it's a new layout manager. Is that right? Sorry, no, grid layout. Sorry, grid layout. Grid layout is a layout manager. And this is where Eclipse doesn't help you so much. It's a grid layout. We just have to remember that from what we've been doing each time. And we'll be learning about new layout managers as we start using their designer. And the grid layout takes the number of rows and the number of columns that I want to put in my grid. Now here's where I have to go back and remember, I'm planning to have this many rows and this many columns. So let's go ahead and use those variables here when I'm telling it what the grid layout should be. So let's do game rows, game calls. Game rows, game calls. And as I'm planning my program here, I realize my plan is to make a grid of buttons to match that layout of rows and columns. But I want one more row so I can show some information as I click on buttons, just to practice having them do something. So I'm going to add one to my number. Oh, sorry. I'm going to add one to my number of rows, just to give me an extra row at the bottom of my dialog, my content pane. For display, it's only for displaying messages, and it might be if I'm writing a game showing what the score is or what the time, what the clock is showing as I'm trying to maybe race along the game. Now comes practicing using, let me zoom out here for you. Now comes practicing using arrays. And I've given you part of the code here. My plan is to create a grid of buttons, but use a 2D array to hold all the references to my buttons. So if I know that I want a 2D array of J buttons stored in the variable btn array 2D, what do I put here to give me that array, that 2D array of buttons? What code goes here? Three things. Well, one thing I need to know, what type is it? They're J buttons. Okay, so J button is the type. The array size is going to be these two numbers, game rows and game calls. Okay, so game rows and game calls tells me how many rows and columns I want. I'm going to be storing J buttons in it. So what goes here? No this yet. I'm not adding anything. I'm creating a place to hold J button references. Pretend what would it be if these were integers? Int a equals, if I had a 2D array or even a 1D array, what do you do to create your array once you declare it? Anyone? Yeah, data type in brackets. One thing right before the data type, new. That's right. Remember, you have to say new. Remember, new is mean make room in memory for this to hold this, and it's a bunch of buttons. There's the data type, and just like Joe was saying, the brackets tell me how many rows I want to have there now. Remember, this only says I'm going to have an array. This says, oh, now let's make room and actually make the object references. Now, how many rows do I have? They're coming from the game rows variable. Don't type the number 3 because we might want to change. Remember, we want to reference our plan where we're storing, it happens to be 3 right now, but we want to be able to change it. So don't use hard copy 3. Reference our variable and gain calls. And remember, this is not creating the buttons ready to display. This is creating an array of references to buttons. There are references to buttons. We have to actually create the buttons down here in this loop now. All this does is give us a place to hold the references to the buttons. And it's easy to think, oh yeah, I'm ready now to go add them to my panel. Nope. This just means, okay, just like you may create an array of ints, you have to assign values to them before you can do anything meaningful. They're all zeros. Well, think of this as these are all null pointers when I've made the array. They're not pointing to any buttons yet until I assign new button to each element in the array, and that is what we're doing right down here. Now let's add a comment to this one that I missed. This is the action handler for all my buttons. And this is something new that they haven't shown you yet in Chapter 6. Remember, I can choose to have the same action handler for every button. And then down in the action handler, we're going to see how we can figure out what button got pressed as we click on them. So now in this loop, again, giving you practice at iterating through all the elements of an array. And I love the variable r. That reminds me that's the row I'm on. So int r equals 0 to the, notice there is no bracket here because I want to know how many rows in my array. There's no bracket there, dot length. But in the columns, notice it is bracket r dot length to know how far to go in the column. So very important, if I need the dimension of how many columns there are, I have bracket r and then dot length. If I want to know how many rows there are, it's just the array, 2D array name, dot length. That tells me the number of rows. Now, create a button at this location. Well, how do I access the element at location R and C? btn array, 2D, that's the name of my array, bracket R, bracket, oops, put the brackets in the right place, bracket C. Oh, and then I said equal to, come on, there we go, equal to, what do I do here? If I now want to have a reference to a button, it's going to be a J button, but remember, I have to do new J button, create the button object now. At this point, I'm creating a button object, and in parentheses is the parameters to its constructor. Now, I want to have the button label show my row and column assigned to that button. So let me draw out on the, well, I'm not going to draw out the board because I'm putting this on the recording here. Suppose we want the label should show something like 1, 2 if it's the button at position 1, 2. How do I get that to show in the button? Well, I have to tell it, okay, show a parenthesis, and now what row that is, R, plus, now show me a comma, and now the column that it's on outside of parentheses, and now end it with the right parenthesis. This means create a button with this showing on the label. Oh, and I forgot the plus, so I've got red marks right there. Concatenate all that together into a string, and that will become the label to that button. Okay. Yeah, it gets a little small up on the screen as I try to fit it. Let me adjust these away. And adjust these over. So remember, anytime I need the literal parenthesis, I have to surround it in quotes. If I want to get at the variable value of the variable r, that has to be outside of quotes. Comma in between them is a literal string in quotes. The column number outside of the quotes, and then the ending parenthesis for this now will become the label of my J button. Yeah, I'm recording this. Does that make sense? Now, here's the tricky part. Even though I have not, well, actually I did define my action listener, sort of. I'm going to be working on that some more. I want to assign the action listener to every button. So, in order to add the action listener, I do btn array. The same button that I'm working on right now that I've just created is now a valid object. So now I can do things with it like dot add action listener. And the argument to the action listener is the action listener I created up here. That's a button listener. btn action. And because of errors down below, it's giving me red right now. Don't worry about that. Once we create this and fix the errors down here, we'll be good. Okay, so don't worry about any red lines right now there, as long as you have that spelled correctly. Now, in order then for it to appear on my content pane, remember we created a variable called my content pane. Now, we're going to do my content pane dot add, and again, this button that I am currently dealing with, btn array 2d bracket r bracket c. (2d), there you go. Thanks for catching that. There we go. And you see, sometimes you get red arrow errors when there's a problem later on. So this is one case where the error is actually caused by something further down in the code. But don't worry about it for now. We'll come back to this. So pause and observe what we're doing here. We're iterating through every row and column of my 2D array of buttons, creating the button with a given label, connecting an action listener that hasn't yet been fixed yet, and then adding it to my content pane. And if all is right in the world, I will see a window full of a grid of initially 3 by 3 buttons. But it's not going to work yet until I fix this last error. We've got a listener that's doing nothing. Look at that. It's supposed to be an action listener, but I removed the code to make you practice what this needs to look like. Remember what we do. Anytime we have an action listener in a GUI, what do we add here? Implements action listener. And then we let Eclipse do the rest of the work for us, like adding the necessary methods. So implements action listener. And I have to have everything spelled just right or it doesn't know what I'm talking about. And now I get Eclipse saying, wait a minute, something's wrong here. Okay, let's add the unimplemented methods. Now Eclipse is happy with that, and if I come back here, now it's happy with this, because it sees, oh, that button action is a valid action listener. So Eclipse did all this work here for me. Down to there? Okay. And see what I did. All I did is I had to remember to type implements action listener. Then I let Eclipse add the methods that need to be implemented if I'm going to implement the action listener, which is a abstract class requiring me to have this one specific method called action performed. Okay? Not happy with that override? It's happy with mine. What's going on? Is there a typo up above, maybe? Oh, put it the line above. What does that say? Method action form. Okay. Dialog is open button must override. Super class.
This was implemented by
Put it in the right place. Well, let's see. Go ahead. We'll keep putting the code in here. Go ahead and do that. What's that to do with it? Okay. Well, we'll see what goes back.
this is the error.
Okay. I'm not sure why it's doing that. Now here comes a new little trick for you. I'm going to have the same action listener for every button. Now, how am I going to know what button they clicked on and what to do with how they clicked? Well, let me show you a little trick. I don't like arg0 here. I like to use E for the event that got sent to this button. And I'm going to replace that to do with, watch this. I need to know which button got pressed. So in order to do that, I need to have a reference to a button. And I'll call it this button. In order to know which button got pressed, and this is just something I learned from experience, I have to do this thing called a typecast. I have to say, okay, I know I'm getting a button, and it's coming from e.source. Sorry, get source. The get source, what that means is that's the thing that generated the event. And you see it in the comment. The object on which the event initially occurred. What that means is the button that got clicked. So get source gives me a reference to the button that got clicked, but because the event only tells me, well, that's some sort of object, I have to do this thing right here. Have you seen this before? The typecast. This is where the typecast is very useful. Sometimes we're just casting a double to an int and throwing away the decimal. That's a boring typecast. This typecast means I've got an object that generated this click. I want to treat it as a button. And so by assigning it to my JButton variable, now I can get at the label that's on the button. And what I'm going to do now in this action, all I'm going to do is set the label LBL info to show what button just got clicked. So I'll put a comment, display latest clicked button in the LBL info. Well, LBL info dot set text set text dot set text. There we go. We're going to have that be the button that just got clicked. This button dot get text. So whatever label is on the button that got clicked, his label will show up in the info label that's down at the bottom of my content pane. So I get the reference to the button that was clicked using this nice little construct. My events get source, treat it as a button. Think of that typecast as treat it as it's a button, because I know up in my code above that's the only thing that has the action attached to it. Now this all should work unless, let's see, I'm going to save, and I think it all should work now if the world is right. Oh, wrong program. That's another program I'm working on. have to select my project here and then run. There we go. And now if I click on a button, its label shows up in the label below. And I have to grab my little window, make it more visible. Yes? Okay. Right. Yep. You can make classes, and what this means is this class is only known about by this outer class dialog 1. You can have inner classes. But I could just as well have made this an external action listener as a separate file. But because I only need to use it here, I'm avoiding having more files laying around. If I only care about using it here, same thing for that, well, the button listener. I don't want to make a separate button listener if it's only needed here in this dialog. Just make it a inner class. And that is legal. Now watch what I can do. Remember that my grid was 3 by 3? Yeah, let's make it a chessboard. 8 by 8. And now all I have to do now as I click buttons, I can decide, okay, are you starting to move a piece? I can start moving icons. Just by changing the size there, I can have another grid. Oh, the labels don't show up. Notice what Eclipse or what Java is doing for me. Because, well, actually, this is the Layout Manager doing this for me. Remember, Layout Manager handles arranging things for me. There's a very painful thing that you don't want to have to learn about doing. Figure out letting the Layout Manager handle resizing things for you. Makes your life so much better. We're going to be doing more in Chapter 12 of the details of painting things. But Layout Managers for basic objects, that's what's helping these things arrange correctly. And as I click on them, my label shows up. Yes, Brandon? Okay, so back in the main class, remember all the main does, it simply instantiates the first class. It just makes it an instance of dialog 1 and then sets it to be visible. What's it say? All right.